Hello and welcome to the World Wanderers podcast, a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Amanda.
And we're your hosts.
We're a traveling couple and digital nomads taking you on our adventures as we explore locations, destinations, and careers.
Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the World Wanderers podcast. We are super excited and grateful that you've decided to join us for today's episode of the show. And today on the podcast, we are very excited to be rejoined by Annette and Daniel Fortner from Chase for Adventure. Now, if you remember, we had them on the podcast back in the fall of 2019. And at that point, they were in the Philippines, and we talked all about creating a YouTube channel, creating a life of digital nomadism, traveling and working and all of that good stuff. Now, since we talked to Annette and Daniel back in the fall of 2019, they've had a lot of crazy stuff happen to them. We're not going to spoil the details of all the craziness that's happened for them in 2020, but we will say that there has been a lot going on top of just what everyone else has been dealing with coronavirus.
Yeah, over the past year, as we've been living through what has been a very crazy 2020 for everyone, we've consistently been like, oh, wow, Annette and Daniel are having a really intense year. There's a lot of things happening. So they started off in Asia, and we'll kind of continue the story from there as we get into the episode.
Absolutely. But before we dive into the episode, we just wanted to talk quickly about the World Wanderers Insider. The World Wanderers Insider is a bonus podcast that is all about teaching you how to successfully work and travel. So to be able to work from anywhere in the world with Wi-Fi. And it's really awesome because Annette and Daniel actually came on the Insider to talk about how they created a YouTube channel that they've monetized. They also talked about how they have been able to save money, make money while traveling, while building their YouTube channel, and much more. So if you want access to that episode, plus all the other episodes that are in the library, and there's over a year's worth of content there now, you can head on over to patreon.com/The World Wanderers. Once again, that's patreon.com/The World Wanderers. Okay, now on to the interview.
All right, Annette and Daniel, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
We're so happy to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you back on. We were looking at the last time we chatted, and we were actually in Guadalajara in Mexico in the fall of 2019. So it's been well over a year. Lots of things have changed in the world and for you guys. And so maybe we can kind of go back a little bit before we kind of just talk about, just this last sort of year. Can you guys kind of catch us up on what you've been up to since everyone heard from you last back in the fall of 2019, which might feel like a lifetime ago at this point?
Honestly, it really did, because life was remarkably normal still in 2019. We spoke to you when we were still in the Philippines, and we actually ended up going back to the Philippines in early 2020. And loved our time there. Then we got spontaneously invited to this crazy Indian wedding. We went and spent a month in India. It ended up being like a millionaire's wedding with the sweetest people in the whole wide world. We ended up staying in a palace. Daniel was playing camel polo. And we just spent 2 days looking at each other the entire time, wondering, is this real life?
Being like, what did we stumble into? Who are these people that invited us? Because they were so nice. And then all of a sudden it was like, welcome to a fully furnished palace that you could stay in, complimentary of us.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, we've never been to an Indian wedding, but that sounds amazing to get like a really traditional in India experience, and the palace sounds insane.
It honestly was. And I think for us, every time that we meet with like a subscriber or a follower, like we are super chill about it. We're like, let's go to a coffee shop, let's go to dinner. We're not thinking anything of it. When this person invited us to the wedding, we're here thinking, I swear, y'all, I was genuinely believing that I was going to be sleeping on someone's couch, that I was just going to be going to like a mom's house, sleeping on a couch, eating the homemade food. And then we get there and it's like, welcome to the Jai Mahal Palace. I will take your bags. Let me show you to your room. Oh, all of the food. Yeah, all of the food is free. You can have anything that you want. I was like, what? And there's massages at and henna and chemical.
Yeah.
It was just too much. Like in all of the best ways. And we did get to dress up at like Indian prince and princesses. And apparently not meet, but we got to see a concert of one of India's most famous singers, whose name is Guru Randhawa, because he was the singer, like the main headline performer at the Indian weddings dance party. I didn't even know who this was.
Yeah, that is crazy. That's really interesting though. And so where did you guys kick off 2020?
So we started 2020 actually in Sri Lanka. We had worked with like a motorcycle company, and we had gotten a really awesome motorcycle to do a road trip all through the island. And we had kicked off 2020 just being like, you know what, we're going to be surfing on a beach. We didn't actually have the money to go back home to visit family. And then we were planning actually on going back 3 months after. And so we were like, you know what, we have Christmas and New Year's in Sri Lanka. Let's just relax, hang out, have some fun. So we finished our motorcycle trip, which was amazing. We went through the mountains, we went through beach towns, we went through a national park and had to literally dodge 7 elephants in the middle of the road. It was insane. It was so cool. And so after Sri Lanka, we were like, well, where do you want to go? Like, we're trying to finish the different countries in Asia. And we realized that China was really close. And to top it off, in Sri Lanka, we met a Chinese girl that we became friends with who lived in Shanghai, where we were going in like 4 days.
Well, not to mention that we had 2 of our best friends from back home that had wanted to travel with us. And we had kept asking them, like, guys, where do you guys want to go? Like, we're totally chill. Do you guys want to go to Thailand? They're like, just what's a country you haven't been to yet? So we gave them a little bit of a list, and they're like, I am dying to go to Shanghai. Because obviously for us, it's a couple-hour flight. For them, it's like 46 hours on an airplane and then taking a whole week off of work to only really explore for 4 days. So anywho, we land in Shanghai on January 8th, and we fall completely in love with the city. We started eating all of the food. Everything is perfectly normal, y'all. We're like going to the mall. We're talking and meeting with all of the Chinese people. We're learning some Mandarin ourselves. We're taking the metro everywhere. And the girl that we had met in Sri Lanka, her name is Shishi. She was like, oh my God, you should come. I'd love to show you around. We had a great day just sightseeing all through Shanghai because that's where she's from. And just enjoying it. Then her friends get there just a few days later, and we have the best time. Mind you, things are still normal in January of 2020, right? Even in China. It wasn't until, I
think it was our second to last day where Shishi messaged us through WeChat and was like, hey, Annette and Daniel, I just wanted to let you know, but please be careful and wear a mask. There's this virus they found. And we didn't think much of it, to be honest.
I was super naive, y'all. I have to be honest. I was like, virus schmirus. Like, this virus doesn't know my immune system. I've eaten off the floor in India. Don't tell me what's going to get me sick. But given, isn't that like talk about tweets that don't age well, right? Thank God I didn't have a Twitter. At the time, nobody knew what coronavirus was. It wasn't even called coronavirus at the time. They were just like, it's an epidemic, wear a mask. And so anywho, we were supposed to stay through Chinese New Year because we were like, well, it's already there. But it was so expensive, like everything in Shanghai, our accommodation, the metro, the Uber prices, the food prices, everything doubled to tripled. So we're like, you know what? Maybe it's not such a good idea for us to go. Let's go to South Korea because, we're right here and the flight's super cheap. And this turns out to be the day before China locked down all of its borders. So now passing off the mic to Daniel, where he tells us the mess of South Korea.
So this is like the end of January-ish?
January 21st is when we left China. And January 22nd is when lockdown came into effect.
Wow.
And so from there, we actually went to South Korea and we got on the plane. And at this point, everyone's wearing masks and we were wearing our masks as well. But everyone has this like really concerned vibe about them, you would say, when we got on the plane. And we were like, we had no idea what was going on. And so we're like walking to our seats. We're looking at all these different nationalities and everyone, I tell you, everyone is reading the same article in different languages. And we were like, what is happening? So we used our last minutes of data to Google what was happening. And then they had found that the virus from China had just made it to Seoul, South Korea, where we were going. And we were like, well, you know what? We're only spending 4 days.
Yeah.
We're only spending 4 days in South Korea. Like, it'll be quick. We'll wear a mask. Thankfully, the virus has only shut down China. And maybe, you know what? China took like extra precautions because it's China. And we were like, we'll just go South Korea and move on. Well, we went to South Korea. We had an amazing time. We ended up meeting some people in our hostel, going out for a night. Probably wasn't the smartest idea.
Okay, seriously, actually the dumbest idea. I'm going to tell you one quick tidbit about this night out. Daniel and I, a couple things to note about us. We're not big drinkers. That's not to say that if we get into it with a group of people that we won't get carried away in the moment, but we're not the people that like go to 7-Eleven and buy a beer to watch a movie at home. And we also don't really stay out past like 10 p.m. Well, nothing in South Korea where we were staying in Hongdae opens until after 1 p.m. because nothing closes until 5 a.m. So we had already like mentally prepared ourselves like, okay, tonight's going to be a later night. And we met these people. They didn't leave for the bar until midnight. And you know what? Daniel and I looked at each other. We're like, we're in our 20s, man. We act like we are grandparents. You know what? We're just going to go out. They told us to get this drink called soju. It tastes like apple juice. It is basically a Long Island, y'all. So after drinking 3 or 4 of those, we go to a bar and play beer pong. Like mid coronavirus, again, we're not realized this is barely an epidemic still. Play beer pong where they're drinking from the actual cups at a bar. And by then we were so drunk, we're like, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. Oh. It was great. Well, that night ended up ending at like 7 a.m. right next to our hostel, getting food, having like just drunk conversation with other people, which was great. So then 3 days pass, we leave South Korea, and where did we go after South Korea?
We came to Thailand, but things got kind of dire in South Korea on the last couple of days that we were there. We ended up getting a message from the government that was in Korean, like from our local SIM card that we had gotten, and had our hostel person, like the hostel host, read it to us. And they said, now it's mandatory to get a mask. Everybody said, go to 7-Eleven and buy a mask. It's required. The epidemic is here, yada, yada. And Daniel goes to 7-Eleven to get us some masks. And he's like, Annette, everybody was at 7-Eleven in line to get these masks. We got the last 2. So this is when it starts to kind of sink in that things are getting a little bit serious. And we're like, you know what? Let's go to Thailand. Thailand feels like a safe place. And we had also gotten invited to do a documentary there. There's this awesome director. His name is Daniel Mason, a really good friend of ours now, who has already filmed a film in Thailand before called Beasts of Burden, where he covers just like the animal tourism industry, specifically with elephants, and kind of unveils some of the darkness behind that and how people can make better choices. And we're like, this is totally something that we can get behind. They took us to Ko Chang, which is this beautiful tiny island. The virus hadn't really made it to Thailand yet. So we go film a documentary for a few days and decide to do a workation. And then this is when we settle into Bangkok. And this wasn't for the podcast, but I think that this is like the actual time that we all talked, which is when we were in Bangkok back in February. But things were still normal when it was in Thailand. So we were like, okay, well, at the end of our visas, you know, Thailand has no cases. It seems like South Korea, which also had locked down their borders right after we left. South Korea, China, and I think Japan. This is when all the cruise ships were stranded in the middle of the ocean, if anybody remembers those days. So we were like, you know what? Let's go to the Philippines. This sounds like a good idea. We're going to go to the Philippines. We're going to go and film for a couple of weeks because we loved it there. And get this, y'all. The day that we land at Manila Airport, guess what freshly docks into the airport area? All of the sick people from the cruise ship. This was, I think, on like 24th of February.
They had come through the airport that we were in, maybe not 12 hours before.
Oh, wow. Did you guys get sick at all during all of this?
No, at all.
No, to be fair, at this point, we were taking it pretty serious. Like, mask on everywhere, using hand sanitizer, social distancing, like not being in crowds. We were playing it pretty safe. And yeah, no, we didn't get sick.
I'm not sure if you guys know this or not, but it was actually while emailing with you, Annette, that I heard of coronavirus for the first time. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I think we were talking about a blog post that we were working on or collaborating on or something like that, or maybe for the Insider. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but we were in our apartment in Panama City and you'd said like, oh, we're good. Just like running around Asia, like trying to escape the coronavirus. And I was like, coronavirus? What is this? And I turned to Ryan and I'm like, have you heard of this coronavirus that they're like running from in Asia right now? And he's like, yeah, I've seen a couple news articles about it, but it's kind of blowing up over there. And I was like, do we need to know about this? And we were kind of like, yeah, we should pay attention, but like we're in Panama, right? So it's actually like from you guys that I first heard about this thing. And it's wild to think about this time where I'm like, what is this thing? I've never heard of this before.
No way. I forget that. It's crazy because it's been so long that it's been a pandemic and that everybody's been dealing with this, that like it hit Asia first. At this point, Daniel and I have always thought like, man, we're really just that irresponsible the first half of the year.
No, I mean, definitely not. I mean, I think most people I think Asia got hit, right? And then it was like Europe. But in North America, I mean, we've talked to lots of people with similar stories of like continuing to travel, not sure how bad it's going to get. And then borders are just closing. And people are just trying to like get home or find somewhere to hang out for, however long this is going to take. And I don't think that anyone really could have predicted where we are like almost a year later.
Oh, absolutely not. So at what point after our conversation did it start becoming something that started impacting you guys?
Yeah, we were like paying attention to it. And then trying to think, I remember, so because just being online, you'd see like all these videos of like, people in Hong Kong, people in Korea, like not giant lines at stores of people trying to get like masks or thermometers or that type of thing. So I remember we went out because I was kind of like, oh, we should go get like a thermometer and make sure we've got our vitamins, maybe try to find a mask. And we went out and did all that stuff and it was like really easy to find. And then I remember a couple weekends later, we went to like what is like the Panama equivalent of like Costco. And it was just kind of not quite like craziness in there, but like everyone in there had like a 20 pack of Lysol wipes in their cart. And we were like, oh shit, this is really like happening here. And then we ended up leaving Panama March 18th. Just kind of suddenly we like booked a flight like 4 days before and we're like, this is getting bad. We're going to leave. And then like 2 days later, they closed the airport and the airport was closed for like 8 months. And they had like an incredibly intense, restrictive, repressive, like curfew lockdown system going on. So we were really lucky to get out of there when we did.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, you guys were very lucky to get out there when you did. That's awesome. You guys went back to Canada, right?
Yeah, we were in Canada from mid-March until the end of October. So we were there for like 7 months.
Wow.
My goodness. But that must have been so nice for at least the first little while, getting to see your family again, getting to kind of get into the swing of things for a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, when we got home, it was a bit crazy because Canada has like a mandatory 14-day quarantine. And because we don't have a home in Canada, we did the quarantine with my parents and like their guest suite, because my parents are actually like an interesting kind of like, when you're like, were we being irresponsible? My parents actually like left Canada to try to get down to Panama on March 11th. And before they left, I was like, things are kind of like getting a bit weird in the world. Like, are you sure you're good? And she's like, yeah, we're good. Like, we're not too worried about it. Like, I've got all my hand sanitizer and like all the things. I'm good. My mom's like a total germaphobe. So I was like, yeah, you're prepared. And they stopped in Vegas for, I think like 3 days. And then on or 2 days. And then on the 13th, when they were supposed to fly, she FaceTimed me in the morning. She's like, nope, we're going back home. This is getting way too crazy. And then within like 24 hours, we'd booked our flight. So my parents were also required to quarantine. So we did the quarantine with them. And then we spent another 3 weeks with Ryan's parents because that's where our car was and stuff. But everything was closed. So it was pretty weird. Like Canada was pretty much in like a kind of like a lockdown where it was encouraged to go outside and get fresh air and like go for walks, if you could imagine that.
Oh my goodness.
Dang, well, that's awesome. You got to spend it with the family.
I did see that y'all were in some thick winter jackets. So I cannot imagine what that transition from like nice, sunny Panama to here I am in a parka, essentially.
Yeah. It's quite the temperature change from like almost at the equator to Alberta. And well, we got back in March, but yeah, it was dreadfully cold. But yeah, so for you guys, you're in the Philippines. This is like February, early February.
Yes. Okay. So this is where the story starts getting a little darker. And this is when we are like, at least our naivety and the brown-eyed and bushy-tailedness of this whole coronavirus thing starts to not be as brown-eyed and bushy-tailed. We originally for months had a tour group planned because part of our business before was taking our subscribers on tours around the world. And we had been planning for, almost a year, a tour group through Thailand. And it was going to happen on March 8th. So the plan was I was going to be in the Philippines with Daniel for 2 weeks. We were going to smash it. We did Palawan, basically the whole island. And then we went and did Siargao. I was supposed to fly to Thailand by myself. And then Daniel was supposed to stay in the Philippines for another couple of weeks while I did the 2-week tours, creating content, just kind of hanging out. Cause like, there's no point of him to go to Thailand. Right. And here he was in this awesome paradise island in the Philippines where you can surf and hang out with friends. And so anywho, we spend the 2 weeks there. Things are still really normal. There are cases in the Philippines, but nobody's scared yet. We did Palawan. Everything was normal. We got to Siargao. And by the time it came for me to leave, things were still normal. Everybody was wearing masks, like at the airport, but I make it into Thailand just fine. I then realized that everybody from back home, this is when I think there were 8 cases in my home state of Florida. But we know Floridians, like we love Florida. We're proud Floridians, but we also know where we come from, you know? And when it comes to rules and regulations, they're a bunch that is a little bit more resistant to these things and a little bit more skeptical to these things. So when I saw that there were 8 cases in Florida, I looked at Daniel and I'm like, I don't have a good feeling about this. This is going to escalate rather quickly. Everybody who was supposed to go on the tours canceled. And so the tours were now canceled. Now I'm in Thailand 3 days before the tours are meant to start by myself. I call Daniel and I'm like, hey babe, like you can totally stay in the Philippines if you want to, but you know, now that the tours are canceled, there's really no point in you staying all the way over there if you wanted to come over here, especially if things get bad.
And so I was like, you know what? Yeah, like being in the Philippines, seeing some friends on Cebu Island, like that would be fun. But if my wife is going to be in Thailand by herself because the tours got canceled, I'm going to drop my plans and go to Thailand. And so I booked a flight for the next day and I left. And again, like normal procedure, everyone wearing masks, kind of like distancing as much as you could, because this was before social distancing was actually a thing. And I get to Thailand. And as soon as I get to Thailand, the Philippines locks down. And come to find out, the Philippines would stay locked down. And what ended up happening is everyone who got stuck in the Philippines ended up paying about $3,000 per ticket. And the airports were flooded with tourists. People who were on Siargao were actually just stuck on Siargao for months. And the reason being is Siargao is a kind of a remote place to get to. You have to take a ferry from Siargao to Surigao that's overnight. You have to take another overnight ferry from Surigao to Cebu. Then you have to take a flight from Cebu to Manila, and then you have to take a flight out of the Philippines. And so like that's kind of the travel day. So it's a proper 24-hour just trying to get out of the Philippines. And so I did that, got to Thailand, and then they locked down the Philippines. And then I looked at each other and we were like, A, my God, we've gotten so lucky. And then B, we were like, where do we go? Okay, so if we're going to be locked down, we want to be in Thailand. Like the culture is something that we love. Like it's a place we know well. We can get around. We know how to get like essentials. And no one here really shakes hands or hugs when you greet each other. They why? You do a quick bow, which is practically social distance. And so we were like, if things are going to escalate, Thailand is going to be the place that's going to handle it well. And that's what happened, I think.
Yeah. And actually, this was a conversation that we had while both Daniel and I were still in the Philippines, because we had plans to go back to America on March 26th. So the plan was do the tours for 2 weeks. Daniel meets me in Thailand. We fly together to America and we go spend, several months with our families, because we hadn't seen them at that point in a little bit over a year. Our flights ended up getting canceled to America. And then we're like, okay, well, do we rebook them? Do we not rebook them? Well, what ended up happening, we had met a lady in November. Well, the last time that we were in Thailand, that she rescues dogs for a living. What she does is she finds stray dogs, she neuters them and spays them. Tourists will come and fall in love with them, and she will help transition them to their final home country, whether that's Canada, the UK, England, France. And she does this through an organization called Action for Dogs. And when we had been doing the tours, she asked us, hey, I know that you guys have tons of people flying back from Bangkok to America. Any chance that they would want to volunteer taking dogs on the flights? And we're like, well, everybody canceled, but you know what? We're happy to take dogs back on the flights. Like, we have no problem doing that. And she was actually super sweet. She even offered to pay for our flights. And so we were then scheduled, after our flights had been canceled, to go from Bangkok to Montreal, drop off some dogs, and then go from Montreal to Florida. But we call her right before I'm supposed to leave the Philippines, when I told Daniel, I don't think that we should go home. I don't think that America's going to handle this well. And he was like, man, you're right. So we call this girl. Daniel and I had the conversation that we already were going to go to Thailand. We're going to hunker down there. We're going to go to Ko Chang, because Ko Chang is like Paradise Island. Nobody goes there. It's super duper remote. It has everything you need and super fast internet. And we call the Action for Dogs lady, and I was like, hey, I am so sorry to do this to you so last minute. I am happy to fly still to Montreal if you need me to. I know that there's dogs waiting to go home, but I'm going to need that flight to be a round trip flight back to Thailand. Like, I'm happy to fulfill my part, but I'm not touching America with a 10-foot pole. I don't care if there's 8 cases. I don't care if there's 10 cases or 1 case. I'm not going there. So she then retorts and goes like, actually, while we were doing a mass neuter and spay on Ko Chang, we decided that we wanted to do a foster house. So what if instead of you flying back home, I got you a home? You don't have to pay rent. I'll cover utilities and water and everything. All you have to do is be responsible for these 10 dogs on the jungles of Ko Chang. And, we'll give you a stipend to cover your expenses. And that's it. How does that sound? And Daniel and I are like, what?
We were like, we're in, sign us up. You're saying I can live in the jungle and wait out the storm of whatever this pandemic is, or epidemic at the time. And we took her up on it. And so within, I think it was 2 days, we had all of the details sorted. She found us a house. We had
puppies.
We had puppies, and we were already on our way to Ko Chang. I think we were settled into the house maybe 4 days after the conversation.
Yeah.
And so once we got to Ko Chang, that's when things got fun, I guess.
Well, that's when the world completely shut down. We moved into the house in Ko Chang March 11th. Thailand closed their borders March 15th. And, that kickstarted what is now a 10-month long stint in Thailand. We live here for all intents and purposes.
Yeah. So you guys have just been in Thailand since the middle of March.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a long time in Thailand.
It is. And you know what? Daniel and I always made the joke. I think we've even made the joke with you guys, anybody who knows us. We're like, we love Thailand so much. One day we're just going to end up moving here. And the universe, by so many means, forced that hand. Yeah. And no regrets, right? Because we love it here. It was an easy sell. And the time that we spent with the dogs, though it was challenging in many respects, because obviously like taking care of 10 dogs is not as cute or as fun as it sounds, even though it has very cute and fun moments.
Yeah.
It sounds really intense. It's so, I can only imagine.
It was so intense. It was every day. You have to be kind of like the leader of the pack, because there's 10 dogs and they need to see you as alpha, and they're big. And so you're living in the middle of the jungle where they're chasing monkeys and snakes and lizards through this massive yard, and with like dangerous snakes, like poisonous. There were like the millipedes that are like, yes, will kill you if they bite you. Like, those were in our yard. And then we balanced the dynamic between an extremely rich neighbor, like millionaire owning businesses, has treehouse, 2 helicopters, and his own brewery.
Okay, which he invited us to. And that was another one of those crazy moments, very similar to the Indian wedding, that it's like, how did we end up here?
Yeah.
Very nice guy. Very nice guy. Very, very rich. I definitely aspire to be him one day.
Exactly. So we had that on the left side of the house. We had a national park behind us.
With a waterfall in the backyard.
Yeah. With a little waterfall in our backyard with a huge natural stream that we would take the dogs swimming in. We actually taught them how to swim when the river, like the stream, was low, because it ended up getting like 6-7 foot deep.
Yeah.
And so we would go swimming with the dogs every day because we taught them how to swim. Then on the right side of the house, we had a lady boy and her expat boyfriend who was like older, just kind of wanting a peaceful life in the jungle. Then you had a working family that had to sell fruits to make a living. So like we would give them all of the fruit from our yard because it was expensive. It's durian. And they made a living off that. And then in front of us, we had construction workers. So we had every bit of social dynamic, like every
socioeconomic status that you could find in Thailand, from the super wealthy that, like we've mentioned, 2 helicopter pads, built a treehouse plantation for him and all of his friends, to having the same people right next to him living in tin huts with no AC, having to take showers outside, raising their own chickens because that's what they eat. It was just such an awakening experience. And at the time, I think it's also important to note that Thailand, we love it here, and I have nothing but good things to say 900% of the time. But there is that other percent of the time when they mentioned that foreigners were the ones that were bringing in COVID at the beginning of the pandemic, which made Thais very afraid of anybody who wasn't Thai. And so this wasn't a super huge deal for the more affluent people that were living around us, but especially the people who were working class, who, don't speak English, don't know how to interact with us, don't deal with foreigners on a daily basis. They would throw bottles at our yard, throw glass bottles, trying to kill our dogs. They would break into our backyard, trying to steal our fruit trees, even though we would have just given it to them. We would get dirty looks. There were fights with the landlord and the neighbors.
Like actual fist fights.
We filmed them for our purposes. Those are never going on YouTube, but it was just one of those experiences where we saw a side of Thailand that when you come here for a month or 2 at a time, you don't experience. And then on top of that, Ko Chang, as beautiful of an island as it is, and as awesome and exotic as living in a jungle sounds, it's a hassle to do life. Things like getting drinking water. You have to hop on a motorbike, go down a dirt road, take a left at the pineapples, go down another dirt road. Like giving people directions to our house was literally take a right at the pineapples and just follow the road until you hit the river. I've never lived that remote before. And then taking the dogs to the vet. There's only one vet in that whole entire island. We had a motorbike, and our dogs, like we've mentioned, have fought monkeys. So they would get these giant gashes where they look like they're bleeding out. So here we are, Daniel and I, with a 50-pound dog going up the steepest mountains, y'all. The steepest mountains. Sometimes in the rain where we both thought we were going to die. We got into 2 motorbike accidents while we were in Ko Chang. And actually this was originally supposed to be a 3-month arrangement. But because COVID continued kind of wreaking havoc, they couldn't get any other volunteers inside the house. It just had to be people who were already in Thailand. And so we ended up staying there 5 months. And the only reason why we ended up leaving was because we got into the worst motorbike accident of them all, which left Daniel unable to walk for a few months. He got 2 bolts from the motorbike stuck in his foot after a truck tried to side sweep us off the road.
Oh my God.
And it tore, I'm assuming, a few ligaments in my left wrist, where I was left one-handed for several months. As a matter of fact, it's been about 7 months since the accident now, and I am just now able to do a plank or do any sort of weightlifting that closes my left hand. And that accident, it wasn't even just the accident, right? Right after, since Daniel couldn't walk and I was one-handed, I had asked for tramadol from the doctor because I was in ridiculous amounts of pain. And when they gave me the tramadol made me so nauseous that I thought I was going to die. I was like, I'd rather deal with this pain than with the nausea. But the nausea, after I stopped taking the tramadol, didn't go away. And I had a pregnancy test that was sitting in my drawer. And I was like, you know what? We're having to abruptly move out of Ko Chang. I've been carrying this around for a couple of years. Before throwing it away, I might as well take it. And it was positive. So,
I mean, congrats.
Thanks. We're very happy. We're very happy and excited now. At the moment, we're like, I'm incapacitated. Annette's arm is hurting. She's still having to take care of 10 50-pound dogs. We're trying to move out of the jungle. We're actually having to because we can't do anything back there. And
our bike was totaled, so we couldn't even get drinking water. We couldn't get food. We couldn't get anything.
And so we abruptly made the move to Bangkok, to where we just kind of hunkered down and waited until I could walk. And that is when Annette went through, I think, her worst month of the pregnancy, to be honest.
And the worst month of probably my life, y'all. I'm going to be honest. Because this was now we have fast forwarded from when we started with the dogs in March to this is July 15th when we got into the accident. Amnesty for tourists. Thailand basically told all of the people who got stuck here, hey, you can stay here for free until further notice. But on July 31st, we are all kicking you out of the country. So get the hell out. Okay.
That's a bit stressful on top of like, hey, we've gotten in an accident. We're moving. And I just found out I'm pregnant.
Yes, exactly. And so I'm here thinking I'm going to get booted out of Thailand, but America's going through the thick of it. I think like their first, like Florida was the epicenter of the disease around this July, August period, which is where our families are from. So then we're here thinking like, man, well, like, do we have the baby in America? Do we live with my parents? Do we live with your parents? All of the flights are being canceled. Do we just stay in Thailand? Do we try and get a different visa? No. And I was sick and nauseous. And to be honest, y'all, panicking because this was an unexpected pregnancy, if we're being totally candid here. And during the middle of a pandemic, which is nobody's dream. And so I was not having it. I couldn't even eat food. I was vomiting all day and I was having mental breakdowns on a regular basis.
Pretty accurate.
I feel like, I can definitely like empathize with that. I feel like that would be extremely stressful. Before we go too far away from this though, I have to ask, you traveled with a pregnancy test for a couple of years?
Yes. Okay. So here's what happened. Back home, pregnancy tests are like $25. And so when we first started traveling, we went to Chiang Mai. We went to a pharmacy and learned how cheap you can get medication, right? Because y'all know American healthcare. You like go, you need like an antibiotic and it's like $1 bajillion. You need to see 3 doctors before you get it prescribed. By then you're like dying of kidney failure. And so I went to a pharmacy in Chiang Mai and everything was so cheap. And I saw this pregnancy test that was like 30 baht, which is $1. And I was like, oh, I'm taking this, because you never know. Like, what if I'm like in China and there's an oops, like Daniel and I are married. So it's just like,
you're not doing anything wrong.
Exactly. So I was like, you know what? I'll just keep it because if there's ever like an oops or an emergency, I don't want to deal with the anxiety and then have to be like in Korea or in China where I'm having to Google translate. Do you have a pregnancy test? You know what I'm saying? Like I was just trying to avoid awkwardness in the future.
Yeah. I mean, it clearly worked out well for you, I was just curious. I'm like, this isn't on my packing list. I don't think I've ever had a pregnancy test in anything I've traveled with. I'm like, is this something that I should be doing? But I totally hear you. $1 pregnancy test. You never know. It does save that like awkward, like this is what I need at a grocery store or pharmacy or something like that. And I mean, it definitely seems like you got a good use out of it.
Yeah. And it's funny because I definitely did not buy that pregnancy test thinking that that was the one that was going to be telling me about my future child. It was definitely like, if we ever have like a drunken mishap, like I want to just have the peace of mind. I don't want to have to deal with the anxiety. I wasn't thinking that this was going to actually give me the anxiety, This is supposed to take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like, as that deadline was approaching, what were you guys like thinking? What was that like?
That this was actually a period in Daniel's and I's relationship where he and I were could not be on further pages from each other. For the first time in our 7 years of a relationship, this was probably, I don't want to say a rough patch, like it didn't like divide us in any sort of way. But as far as coming to terms or agreeing on something, this was a difficult time.
Wow, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what she's referring to is when we were in Bangkok. Remember, I'm still on crutches, unable to use my left foot because it has 2 holes in it that are closing up. And Annette is dying from pregnancy nausea. And we're having to sit here and figure out what we're going to do because, like she had said earlier, Florida's starting to ramp up and become the epicenter for the United States. And we're in what is now a COVID-free country. There was no COVID in Thailand in September. And so we were having to make the decision of, do we go home to be around family but sacrifice our comfort? We're living in one of our childhood bedrooms, no matter which parent we stay with. That means giving birth in America at the time, they weren't actually letting spouses come into the room during labor in certain hospitals because of coronavirus. And so we were weighing the pros and cons of going back and having a baby in the US versus having a baby here in Thailand. And we knew nothing about prenatal care, about actual delivery and how it works in Thailand. All we knew is like emergency care because we had just experienced it and it went pretty well. And so we were having to make the decision, do we stay or do we go? Do we stay or do we go now? But so we were on opposite pages. Annette is like, get me the heck to America. I'm going to go home. We're having this baby there. And I am on the opposite camp of like, I feel like I'm having to help us make a decision that's best for our family. And now it's accounting for a child. We need to stay in Thailand. It's COVID free. We know they have good medical care. We just need to find the information. And like she said, like it didn't damage our relationship, but there's never been a time in our relationship where we have been so distant in that point because we just stood on opposite sides of the camp. And both of us felt that we were trying to make the best decision for our family. So it was coming from a place of love, but it was like, no. I'm locking my heels and you're locking your heels. Let's see what happens.
Right. And this is also, I will say, at the peak of, the most uncomfortable I had been through the pregnancy. For me, I knew that Daniel logically was correct. There's no COVID in Thailand, Annette. We can live for a fraction of the price. There's great medical care. It's a country that we know. We get to keep our independence. We get to still continue teaching online in like regular, business hours because we teach for a Chinese company. There's just too many benefits to staying here. And I'm like, okay, Daniel, that all sounds great, but I miss my mom. Okay. So I don't care about any of this. I wanted to go home in March. That failed. The last few months have been a crap show, to say the least. And I don't want to have this baby all the way out here alone in Thailand with some doctor that doesn't speak English. And so it was just those moments. And then I think also something that was a difficulty for Daniel and I at this time is, and this is something that I'm telling to everybody who's listening to this podcast who maybe is expecting or recently found out that they're pregnant. The beginning of pregnancy isn't what they tell you it's going to be. Even for some people that, have been wanting to get pregnant, there are a lot of emotions involved. And a lot of the time they aren't excited emotions. For the woman, at least, it's like, man, I'm going to lose my body and my independence and my freedom. And I feel like crap. And am I going to be a good mother? Am I even ready to be a mother? I'm not ready to be an adult yet. And so Daniel is seeing me go through all of these conflicting emotions of me really not wanting this baby, where Daniel is expecting, right? Because that's the societal kosher expectation is for people to find out that they're pregnant and be overjoyed and over the moon. And, oh my God, I'm so excited. And it's not like that. And actually, I went on a ton of forums to learn that I wasn't alone. So I'm dealing with the guilt and feeling like I don't want this baby. And Daniel's also thinking, man, Annette doesn't want my baby. And he's excited. So, it was just a lot, y'all. It was a lot. That I don't want to repeat that part of my life at all.
Yeah.
Glad that's in the past.
But to take it on a brighter note, as soon as we sat down, we did all of our pros and cons lists multiple times for 4 days straight. We came to the decision to stay. And so at this point, it was like, okay, let's collect information. Let's figure out how birth even happens here. And so it's a long process to go through that. To make a very long story short, C-section is like 95% what happens here. The doctor is always right. You do not question his intelligence. And like certain things like mandatory episiotomies, and so you have to really search out a doctor who is going to advocate for you for natural birth, that is going to listen to a birth plan, because a lot of times from what we've read and people we've spoken to, you can have a birth plan and the doctor will be like, yeah, we'll do all that. And then they throw it out the window the second you get in for labor.
Right.
And so we ended up going through the whole process of finding a doctor in Bangkok, and we found our doctor and we were like, you know what? We're obviously in a better place now. We found our doctor. We've sorted some life out. We've told our families that we're staying in Thailand kind of indefinitely right now. We found out that, what was it? We could get a medical visa.
Yeah, we did get a medical visa.
We did. And so we decided, you know what, let's just do this epic baby moon road trip through Thailand. And so we actually rented a car in Bangkok and then road tripped from Bangkok all the way to the south. And it was the time of our lives. It was incredible. We were able to be traveling freely within a COVID-free country. We were able to do all of the Thailand tourist spots with no tourists.
Yeah. Although I will say, for anybody who's planning on doing this pregnant, it's possible, but by Costco-sized Dramamine. Okay? Keep it in your pocket.
What is that?
Dramamine is like the motion sickness medication, but it's what they give you for morning sickness.
Okay,
and
gotcha.
I thought it would be a brilliant idea in the middle of like my morning sickness first trimester to take a cross-country road trip when I already get car sick. It was just all of the brilliant ideas, y'all. Smartest girl in the hood here. No,
your baby already has a life of adventure.
Oh my gosh. No. Our baby has caused so much adventure. Just wait until I can throw this all in his face when he's 15. It's like, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So we ended up doing the road trip. We kind of used it as let's find out where we're going to live. And we went all over the South. We came to Krabi, which has always been our favorite place in Thailand, specifically Ao Nang. And we came to Ao Nang and we were about to extend the car rental because the guy said we could extend for the same price. And that man almost tripled the price and was like, sorry, you got a COVID promotion. COVID's not here anymore. And we were just like, well, you can come pick up the car. So they came and picked up the car. We got stuck in Krabi. And Air Asia had done this flight voucher where if you paid $100 per person, you got unlimited flights through Thailand for like 6 months. And we were like, you know what, maybe this is just like an Air Asia cash grab, but at the end of the day, like we'd love to support it. And if we can get free flights, let's do it. So we did it. And my God, it was real. They allow you to book free flights anywhere in the country as long as you book 3 weeks in advance. So we planned out 3 weeks in advance. We ended up going up to Chiang Mai and making some incredible friends up there, living in an apartment, just really like working and going through like coffee shops because Chiang Mai has a lot of trendy ones. And so we went through living in Chiang Mai. Things didn't work out up there because we had rented an apartment and the landlord decided to not tell us that 5 days after we moved in, there was going to be construction above us for like 8 hours a day during the middle of the day, which was lovely.
For 2 months.
For 2 months. And so we were like, you know what? We already have these flights back to Krabi. Let's go back to Krabi. And here we are.
Wow. Yeah, that's I love Air Asia. I love Air Asia normally. I feel like it's like one of my favorite things about Asia, which I like a lot of things about Asia. So that's saying a lot about this airline, but that is a sweet deal.
Oh my gosh, we got so lucky. And honestly, I want to say, I know a lot of people, had really hard 2020s. Daniel and I, with all of the difficulties and all of the surprises, we actually had one of the best years ever. At the end of the day, the pregnancy being a surprise, Daniel and I looked at each other and it's like, listen, like we're 26 and 27. This is a great age to bring in a first child. We're not 19 and 20. We've been married for years. We've been together for 7. And so now we're super excited for the baby. And then also something that we haven't even touched on is we started the year with just under 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. And we are talking to you today almost about to hit 100,000 subscribers on our YouTube. Because of the thing with the dogs, we ended up getting featured on Travel and Leisure, which was crazy. And our business saw extreme sectors of growth. We were able to get out of debt and save money and launch our course again. And so...
Oh, that's right. Sorry, when she says get out of debt, I wanted to throw in here, the pandemic killed all of our income, and they stole the money for our flights back home. So all of a sudden we went from having plenty of money in the bank to being like $6,000 of debt because we had to figure out how to survive in the middle of Thailand.
Right. And not to mention the canceled tours. Like we felt bad, like keeping the people's money. And so we ended up like returning a lot of the money that they had already paid, even though, a lot of them canceled 3 days before. And so we ended up assuming, all of the loss basically for those trips. But anyway, we ended up coming out in a lot of ways on top. And so I don't want to say that I'm grateful for how 2020 happened, but I'm grateful to be here now at the beginning of 2021 after having a year like 2020.
Yeah. I can only imagine. That's like definitely a year of adventure. Pregnancy, holes from bolts in your feet, create all sorts of adventure. So when is the baby due?
So the baby is due end of March. We're living here in Ao Nang Krabi, and we found a doctor in Phuket. So which is like a 3-hour drive away. So whenever things start getting spicy at the end of March, we will go to Phuket and just stay at a hotel right next to the hospital.
Yep.
Amazing. And you guys are feeling like good, excited, about like having a kid abroad and that type of stuff? Or how are you guys feeling?
So I think,
It's mixed.
It's mixed.
Yeah.
A lot of me wants to be around family for this time. And I think that that's a really natural thing for any pregnant woman to want, right? It's like mom, mother-in-law, like sister, especially when we're ordering. So we've just started ordering all of the baby's stuff. We haven't announced the gender, but we've known it for a few months. So we've already been collecting some things. And so that part is super duper duper exciting. As far as like giving birth abroad, I kind of understand after months of research that a little bit is going to be to the whim of the doctor. And I'm just going to have to be flexible with my expectations of how this labor is going to go. I've done a ton of research and I'm doing like hypnobirthing and stuff like that. So I'm going to try and labor at home as long as possible so that by the time I get to the hospital, the baby just walks out of me and we can walk right back out.
That sounds like a pretty ideal plan. I haven't had kids, but it seems like no babies come according to mom's plans, but maybe yours will be obedient.
Listen, we're just going to speak over that, okay? This little munchkin has taken us through the ringer. I'm just asking, kid, come this day, just like walk out of there. Don't make a fuss. Don't even cry. Just like go in there, tell the doctor, cut my umbilical cord, get me in a swaddle blanket. Let's go home. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, no, we're sending you good vibes for that too. I hope that it's all like super smooth, and it sounds like you guys have a good attitude about it, and it's going to be really exciting to see you step into this next chapter.
It's crazy to think that this chapter is already here, because I don't know if you guys want kids, but I know for us, like we wanted kids for a really long time. Like Daniel and I worked in childcare for a decade, and we loved babies. But we always would say when people would ask us, oh my God, when you guys are having babies? And we were like, in like 10 years. And we've been saying 10 years since we met when we were 19 and 20. And so by the time that this last year hit, we're like, you know what, maybe we'll have kids when we're 30. And then our birthdays came and we're like, maybe we'll have them by 35.
Your baby spirit's like, I'm ready. I'm here now.
That's exactly it.
The baby, listen, it's like, no, I come at my time, mama. It's like, okay, child, I hear you.
Yeah, no, very exciting. And I'm sure you'll be amazing parents. I'm sure you're already amazing parents since you're already parents now with your baby's like 7 months, 6.5 months.
Yes.
7 months.
And the munchkin is huge. Oh my gosh. I tell Daniel all the time, this child's training to do Muay Thai or soccer. Lord knows my wrist. The baby likes to hang out on the left side of my abdomen. And I told Daniel, after this baby, I'm going to be going for a 6-pack and only have 5 because the child has beat the crap out of whatever the like 6th pack right under my rib cage is. I may not even have a rib, you know, I may just have to get the other one removed. That one's going to be gone. It's going to leave through labor.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Something else I wanted to touch on was just saying congratulations to you guys with regards to your business growth and your YouTube growth. That's amazing. I mean, that's like a 10,000 to almost 100,000, 10 times growth. Is that right?
Yeah.
Somebody correct me if that math's wrong.
To be fair, I couldn't correct you because I don't know myself. That sounds about right.
That's amazing.
No, thank you so much. We've really been taking the time to soak it all in, because I mean, part of what we do, obviously, we talk to people, and other people ask us like, "Oh, how did you get started? What do you have any recommendations? I want to start YouTube." And it's just like, man, everyone starts at zero, no matter who you are. Everyone starts with a big fat zero, and you have to build from there. And it's crazy looking at where we are now and remembering that feeling of being in my parents' spare bedroom because we had just sold everything we owned, and being like, wow, it's going to be so hard to get 300 subscribers. Do we message everyone on our Facebook friends list?
Right.
And that's what we did. Like, that's how we got our first 1,000 was Facebook. Like, it was from family and friends that we messaged on Facebook being like, hey, we're starting this crazy journey, yada, yada. Would you mind supporting and subscribing to our YouTube channel?
Right. And, you know, especially, and we've actually touched on this before, I think for your Patreon group, where because everybody starts from zero, so many people just don't start at all. When in reality, it just takes years of effort, of knowing your why, of focus, of perseverance, of not quitting, of a pandemic making you fall on your ass, and then you having to pick yourself back up and decide, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to find other ways to create content and to connect with my community. And now to think that, man, like a community of almost 100,000 people, like I don't even know 1,000 people, you know? And to think that 100,000 people have seen at least one of our videos is just the most humbling experience. And we're so grateful. So grateful.
Yeah, that's really cool. You guys have uncovered the recipe for YouTube success. It's just a car accident, a pandemic, an unexpected pregnancy, and being stuck in a country for a year. So if anyone wants to get that course, I'm sure that'll be coming out soon.
You know what? I think if anyone does follow up and ask, we'll make sure that you are the test dummy for the course. Absolutely kidding. I would not wish that on anyone. No. I'm sending you nothing but good vibes and good juju. You're going to stay safe, healthy, and happy.
You do not figure like us to be successful. I pinky promise you.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. On that note, can you share with listeners where they can go to find more about you, watch your YouTube videos, all that good stuff?
Absolutely. They can find us at chaseforadventure.com. Our YouTube channel is also called Chase for Adventure, FOR, not with the number 4. And same thing on Instagram. And if they ever wanted to learn how to become digital nomads, we also have a course that they can just go to worker2wanderer.com.
Amazing. Thank you guys for catching up with us again. It's been, riding all the highs and lows of your last year. And we're just really excited for you guys again with your new little adventure that you're bringing into the world soon. So can't wait to see what life is like once he/she is in the world, and to keep following along with you guys.
Thank you so much, Amanda and Ryan. It's honestly been a pleasure. We love chatting with you guys, and we can't wait to see what 2021 has in store for you guys.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you want more, make sure to check out The World Wanderers Insider, available on Patreon at patreon.com/theworldwanderers.
For show notes, head over to theworldwanderers.com. Find us on social media at The World Wanderers Podcast, and join the private Facebook community at World Wanderers, a community for travelers.
You can always get in touch with us at info@theworldwanderers.com. And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us find new listeners.
See you next time.